Jade is a social anthropologist. She works and lives in Cape Town, where we met, and she's also a writer and an artist. We're here to discuss her novel, Glowfly Dance, which was published in 2015 by Umuzi publishers in South Africa. Jade's book is about growing up with domestic violence. And it's not about the consequences of domestic violence per se or the sequels, but about actually being in it, living it. The book is told from the perspective of a child, Mai, between the age that she remembers, which is 3 years old, to 14, when the story comes to perhaps a predictable but still shocking end. So Jade, to open up our conversation here, maybe you could tell us a little bit about what it meant to write this book for you.
Writing the book meant a great many things because it actually obviously is me very much. So all the events are true, and I changed names and places for some protection. It meant a voice. It meant a voice that was silenced as a child, that had no existence really when I was very small. And it also meant the voice of my mother, who was silenced, who lost her life due to domestic violence. And so this book, in a sense, is a record of what happened around my mother's life and her existence and our existence as children. It's an effort to show people the genuine complexity of domestic violence, to show them that what we hear on the news, somebody died, somebody was killed, somebody was injured, is just the little tiny tip of the iceberg, and we're not going to be able to deal with it until we actually understand all the mechanisms of silencing, of fear, of society itself doing very little to help, because there is just not enough knowledge. And so I really wrote it to raise questions. For me, it's a huge question mark. It's about, this is what happened, this still goes on, and what can we actually do about this? How much can we understand by just looking at what happens from a child's perspective?
The other thing there's this very internal, which I really think you do brilliantly. You really describe it brilliantly and bravely for a broader audience of what happens internally. The other element of the book, which I also think you do very clearly, and you show very clearly, that there are structural factors which sort of prevents. It doesn't prevent the family from seeking help, because the mother does seek help, but it does prevent her from actually getting out of the situation, because there's also structural resistance. So the patriarchal structures of society and the law gives a married woman with 4 children in the 1970s very little to hold on to. Can you tell us about such structural factors, or perhaps about the real threat of abduction of the children?
At one point, because he wasn't from this country, he abducted the 2 youngest children, which were his direct children, from the family abroad, as a punishment actually for something else. So it's for going to the police about something. And then he said he was going to go forever and hurt the children if she tried to stop him before leaving the country. So he disappeared. But he then came back again with no explanation. But that fear of abducting them again was basically held over her head, because she was obviously completely broken up when her 2 young children, I think they were 3 and 1 at the time, or somewhere around there, 4 and 2 maybe, and were whipped away from her. And then when he came back, he had complete control over everybody because she was so frightened. And she then went to social services, and we all ran to a refuge. And although she was at the refuge, he managed to find her within a few months through using the Salvation Army and the police, by declaring that his wife had run away with all the children. And once she had been found again, at that point there were only 2 refuges in the country. She only had 1 more refuge to go to, and the threat of being found again. And with that threat, there was the threat of him abducting the children or hurting people, because she didn't know. This is someone really trying to get out of a very difficult situation and doing everything they can, and not lying down and saying, I'm going to take all of this. And yet all the forces around, friends even, people being ignorant is not actually assisting her in actually achieving anything. And we talk about structures, but the structures are us. The structures are the society we live in and what we believe and how we do or don't talk about violence, which influences police, which influences the law, which influences the friends.
So one of the things that is interesting is this whole sort of this transnationality, if you wish, in the book. That it's the 1970s, it starts in the UK. Both eldest children are from different fathers, a South African and a Filipino, so there is an issue. And then the two youngest from the Moroccan father, Rashid. So there's a mixed heritage in the family. Do you feel that the everyday racism of Britain in the 1970s might have influenced the way that society responded to this family?
It's hard to say because obviously he wasn't from the UK either. I think it was actually the patriarchy that supported him much more. I think obviously a mother with different children from different fathers, she was married twice, and I was the illegitimate child who probably was supposed to be the one who wasn't supposed to be around, and then she kept. And I think that made things complicated and difficult for her. And it's quite early on, you can see there are times when she was very conscious of what people thought of her as this single parent and, you know, absent father and children who clearly had, one of them was with a father from somewhere else. And so I think that also added to maybe her own isolation as well. In terms of it assisting, it's very hard to say. I think it was just, I think for any woman who's got children who are clearly in it, and a number of children who are from other countries, it's quite difficult.
Can you talk about the title, perhaps?
Yeah, so it's Glowfly Dance. So the idea was around the fact that as children, we were fascinated by fireflies. And the idea of this glowfly or firefly is that you follow the trail of light, and it's like a piece of writing. It's circular, it moves in these circles. And as it writes, it's either remembered and written down, or it's gone forever. And so in a sense, this book is a metaphor for a life that is a story of a life that's written and then erased and gone. And the idea is to write it down, to make it remembered. So I just wanted to read this very little piece, which is about being in the West Indies and first turning up there, and a sort of a moment of the end of the day. So at about 13 years old. As we play, day turns to sunset. Golden red lava drip drops out of the sky and fills the spaces between the tree branches where the seed pods grow. I stand and watch. The redness consumes the tree branches as if a huge forest fire has caught the world and is tearing it between its teeth, and all the blood is falling out. I watch the sunset run through its hues, the reds, the oranges, the crimsons, the golds. I am amazed that the world can produce such beauty, just in one go. Everything takes part, the tree branches that darken and become charcoal silhouette smudges, bird calls that strengthen and swell within the incoming night. The sun burns up like a huge cinder. Then the sky is a fire put out, the coals burning, dimming. It makes me think of the fire we had at home when we were little, the flames licking around the coals as if they were hungry for the chestnuts we held at the end of the toasting fork. The sun has become the fire we had at home, and with it all the stories we shared, tucked around the grate, of Mexico, of my sister's father in South Africa, the hot toast and currant buns that sometimes blackened at the sides, the woolen mittens and shoes wet from the snow, and Wellington boots left on the porch, slippery with white-crusted snow melting in puddles below it. I want to dive into the sky and become it. I am taken home, transported to our warm fire. But I am home here too, because the sky is the fire I loved, and the fire the sky, and even my heart is out there, pulsing, all its little veins running like the black branches crossing the sky. What are you doing? Asks Amy, coming up to me. Looking at the sunset, I reply. But the light is darkening now. The fire is dimming, hiding itself. The best has gone. The sky plummets into purple, then a warm black. But we watch nonetheless until the bean tree casts itself into shadow, and there is nothing to make out anymore. until branch by branch it is consumed by darkness. I can only hear the breathing of the trees now, the plants, the scratch of insects, the crunch of our shoes on the soil as we shuffle our feet back and forth. It's like blood, I say. It's like a fire gone out.